Another existential crisis video. Sorry, there's no skit today. Good morning! I will not appear in today's video! No, this is mostly just another one of those kind of state of the channel videos, I guess. I didn't really get to do one at the start of 2025, and also half of this is kind of advice to a lot of the aspiring content creators out there. This doesn't just apply to tech videos, it's just kind of recapping a lot of what I've discovered after, geez, now, oh my gosh, 8 years of doing YouTube. Not that anyone's specifically asking me for advice, but it's just some details or trends that I think I've noticed, and I wanted to highlight kind of why I think the future of this channel is somewhat bleak in a way. I'm not one of those guys that sets a lot of New Year's resolutions or sets channel goals of like, I'm gonna hit this many subscribers by this time. I mean, honestly, it's very, very easy to say those things, but doing them requires a whole nother level of action and research. And I think it should be mentioned that even though on the surface of this channel, you see me talking about Apple leaks or internet service providers or talking about the latest software trends and which ones I think are overrated or underrated, all that kind of stuff, there is a lot of me looking at the tech community as a whole and what's working and what's not working, and precisely how YouTube treats you in this ever bizarre algorithm that we're all subjected to as viewers and as content creators. And it's different dependent on the website you're on specifically, and I won't go too much into the details of all how different social medias perform, but I think YouTube in particular really, really loves consistency. And I don't just mean in upload cadence. I'm not just talking about uploading all the time, although in my experience, yes, channels that upload more frequently, YouTube tends to reward that, especially if they see you very, very consistently uploading one video a day for weeks on end. It doesn't give you much of a mental health break, but the algorithm tends to like that because they want to serve audiences more of what they already want and are already consuming. At least that's the impression I get from the algorithm. If they see you binging a certain type of content, then they're just going to keep feeding you more and more of that same kind of content. And obviously YouTube is a very saturated place. So many people are competing for your attention, and that's particularly the case with the tech community. Like, there are so many people out there that are all trying to make a living out of covering pretty much the same stuff. Lots of people want to talk about the latest phones, the latest laptops and watches, and all the great monitors coming out all at the same time. So how do you stand out? How do you separate yourselves? Well, oftentimes you got to find your niche. You got to carve out a little piece of the market, and that tends to involve leaning more into one type of content or one type of coverage, one type of brand, and then you kind of find the enthusiasts from that niche, and they stick around with you because they either like your personality, they like your style, and there's no guarantees in the YouTube space. I try to remind people of that. It's not like what worked for one creator will definitely work for another. A lot of the time it can simply come down to the sound of your voice or the way you look. Someone might actually stop watching you based on surface level things like that. You just don't know. And there's so many variables at play as to why someone may watch one person's content over another, but I do think it's worth mentioning there is a general trend in most of the tech community space. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. You can look up the same Social Blade channels I have, like watch time is not public per se, but view counts are, and you can see a general trend among most tech channels in the downward direction. And there's a couple variables for that. And of course, there's a few exceptions, but you'll notice with the exceptions, with the tech channels that are able to keep traffic to their pages going up and to keep viewers entertained, they tend to all have some similarities with them. I think they all tend to be fairly brand friendly, like trying to make it feel like anytime there's a big announcement from a company, it's a really, really big deal and you should all get really excited for it, because that enables them to kind of get on the good side of marketing of a lot of these companies and brands. And if you're on the good side, you're on the nice list, as I call it. You can get invited to things. If you get early access to products before everybody else does, that helps separate you from the rest of the industry, and you can get access to interviews and executives from those companies to come on your channel, and that gives you a bit of a competitive edge. Now, I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing, but I do think there are instances in which you might say things about a product or brand that you may not necessarily believe for the sake of, well, I want to get on the brand's good side, that'll be good for the channel. And I think most of us can agree in any line of marketing or any line of content creation, there are ethical and unethical ways to pursue them. Doesn't make them illegal, all. It just means that an audience might not particularly trust you or have a harder time understanding like what your angle is. Is your goal to grow your channel so that you can get more and more exclusive access to things, or is your goal as a content creator to inform and recommend what you think might be the best decisions or best purchases for their lifestyle? But coming back to the vast majority of tech channels that are on the decline, that's not the whole story. The other fact of the matter is that channels don't generate as much AdSense revenue as they used to a few years ago. So even with viewership down, revenue also goes down with it. In case you're getting annoyed with all of the channels that are doing brand deals and sponsorships, it's not necessarily just out of greed, okay? A lot of them are doing it purely out of necessity. I'm fortunate enough to live in a low cost of living area, and I'm basically a one-man show at this point. I do my own editing, and I'm the one doing the research for the videos, and I'm the one recording them. As you can tell, I like to keep it pretty bare bones basic, but it's because I want to preserve the integrity. I want to keep that honesty. My goal here is not to get invited to some kind of exclusive branded events. My goal is to make sure that I keep telling you exactly what I feel, and I try to make the best recommendations I can to you about which products are worth it or not worth it, or at least keep you informed on what products are around the corner. Like maybe don't buy a brand new device right now because here's what's just about to come out in a couple months. But that general decline from other channels, I think, comes from a couple things. For one, we've lost a bunch of viewership, I think, on longer form content in favor of more and more vertical short form content. I think it becomes abundantly clear if you've seen what the teens are watching most of the time these days. They don't got time for 10-minute YouTube videos or even 5-minute YouTube videos. They watch 30 seconds and they get bored and they keep scrolling. And whether or not we like it or think that's good or healthy, most of us probably agree it's probably not good for our mental health or attention spans. But regardless of what we think, that's the way the world is headed. It's headed towards the Instagram Reels, the TikTok Reels, even the YouTube Shorts, which are not for everybody, but they definitely can grab a lot more views faster than a longer form video in this era that I think a lot of tech channels were growing up in. And definitely during the period where I was carving out my niche of the tech community, it was very different. It was all about like how your thumbnail was designed and trying to make your video interesting and hold people's attention. Whereas now a lot of the video content consumed, there's no thumbnail at all. You're just hoping that you get added to the endless vertical list of videos that show up in people's algorithm, and you've got to hold people's attention within the first couple seconds, not the first couple minutes before you have to worry about them clicking off. So that's measurable. There's straight up more people spending more time on short form vertical video than there is long form landscape video. So that's changing the world a lot, and that absolutely, I think, has an effect on the ad revenue and also the number of views that these channels are pulling in. And like I said earlier, YouTube really rewards consistency, and I don't think it's necessarily just with uploads, it's also with what you cover. So as you lean into the niches that you're interested in or you think you can dive deeper into, and you build your channel around that niche, it's in a way kind of putting a lot of your interests and a lot of your audience into one boat. And if that boat starts sinking, you can kind of go down with the ship. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot across these different tech community channels. I'm certainly one of them. I'm not immune to this either, but it goes without saying, yeah, I very much built my brand and my channel around covering Apple and its products. I try to stretch out into other directions when I can, but again, it goes against the niche and it's not as consistent as the rest of the content. So YouTube doesn't push it as much. YouTube doesn't reward it as much. And also they want to be able to keep feeding the videos you're making to other people that are interested in that thing. So if you build your channel around covering Apple products and Apple leaks and rumors and that kind of thing, and then you start breaking into the more pixel coverage of content, or you want to start talking about Samsung Galaxy phones, or maybe you want to talk more about VR headsets or whatever it is, YouTube doesn't want to recommend that because they know, okay, even if we recommend your VR content to someone who watches a lot of VR videos, they could watch your video, subscribe to your channel, but then they get 5 more Apple videos that they didn't care about. So essentially what I'm trying to say is pivoting on YouTube can be particularly challenging, and depending on the niche you're in, it might just straight up be impossible. I'm not saying there's never been a case of a channel successfully pivoting, but I will mention most of the time when a channel grows really, really quickly, it's because they found a niche where there's a lot of people and there's a lot of demand for new types of content covering that niche, and then they just keep giving that niche more and more and more. I mean, look at Mr. Beast as a great example. Probably fastest growing YouTube channel of all time, right? And And once he found that niche of doing the challenges and like giving away lots of money to people, he basically hasn't stopped running with that. So pivoting one channel can be very, very challenging, but starting a different channel and I think catering to a completely different niche usually ends up working a bit better, which is why I'm proud to say, even though this channel is definitely not making as much as it used to, I found a pretty successful niche over on Tailosive EV. And now the EV channel is actually far outpacing the tech channel in regards to growth, in regards to viewers, in regards to everything, basically. And a lot of the time people associate channel size with subscriber count. And I just want to remind people that that follower count means less and less every day because most people are just watching content that's recommended to them. Very few are actually still using the subscription feed. I still do, but I'm probably just old-fashioned. Most people are just using the home tab and clicking the videos that get suggested to them. So whether or not you're subscribed, in my opinion, doesn't actually make a big difference. But the EV channel now has basically become my primary channel because I went for a niche there with electric vehicles. And while a lot of the coverage was with Tesla, I found a lot of success by trying my best to keep it broad. So not just focusing in only on what Tesla's doing, but also checking in on Rivian and Lucid and what the legacy automakers are doing. Although I didn't get as much payoff from covering Ford or GM or Volkswagen products, but I will say people who wanted to learn a lot about new startups that were up and coming, you know, just a few years ago, Rivian had no products on the road and neither did Lucid. And I think what the key is with being successful on YouTube is, of course, the consistency, but you have to find a niche that fits you best, but you also need to find a niche that is growing and getting progressively more interesting. I don't really think that's the case with Apple anymore. So in a sense, a lot of these Apple-focused channels, I think, are kind of going down with the ship. I'm not saying they're all going to close up shop and give up, but the days of growing really substantially and getting more and more viewers watching and getting more and more people excited about the new iPhone every year, it's just not really there. Whereas I feel like every year that goes by, the electric vehicle space gets a little bit more interesting. There's more products coming out that are different than the products that they're replacing, and there's still a lot of education to be done about battery packs and charging curves, and there's a lot of radically different approaches to EVs, like with the real ambitious startups like Aptera trying to make a three-wheeled solar vehicle, or with a company I recently got hired at, Tello Trucks, trying to utilize the electric vehicle platform to make an incredibly compact but very utility-focused vehicle. There's a lot of hype for that. There's a lot of excitement around that because it's unique and because it's different and it's changing. And there's even this like wider public debate around, is electric the future? And there's still some people that are like, yeah, I don't know about all use cases. Maybe for long distance towing or for big trucks, we're gonna still need gas. And others think, no, we can make an all electric, you know, good at towing pickup truck. So there's just more discourse, essentially. There's more to debate about, there's more to commentate on. And it feels like, especially this time of year, there's been EV ideas for content left and right, like nonstop. There's so much growth in this field, and I don't feel the same about covering Apple anymore. There's new iPhones coming that are slightly different than before. There's slightly faster iPads, slightly better MacBooks, but everything is so slight. Everything is so incremental. And again, also very saturated markets. So many channels all trying to cover the same thing at once. And I don't think it was like that when the Tailosive Tech channel started. You know, when I was first getting this channel off the ground, iPhones had not reached their peak in sales volume. You know, that came later after I started making videos, and Apple removing ports from some of their most popular devices in history, like the iPhone 6, ditching the headphone jack with the iPhone 7, that was like a big deal. And the war on bezels, as we used to call it, is essentially over, but that was a big talking point for many years over the course of this channel. That kind of helped me carve out the niche that I have now, and that's what a lot of people started watching me for, was my commentary on what's Apple gonna do with the next iPhone, or how is Apple gonna make the iPad bigger or smaller, or how is Apple gonna reinvent headphones, or do you think Apple is gonna make a smartwatch? These were the kinds of questions we started with when this channel was carving out its niche and first blowing up, whereas now we're not having those same types of conversations anymore. It's like, oh, maybe they'll make an iPhone that folds in half, but most of us don't really want that, and maybe there'll be a thinner iPhone. And so many of Apple's products that we all use are all great. They've matured. Like, there's not that much more that can be done with them. My MacBook Pro is almost 4 years old now, and it still feels like the new Mac to me. It's still super fast. The battery life is great. I love the mini LED display, and it's like, where else can they take this? And similar talks with the iPhone. How much better can a camera get? How much better can battery life get? So I'm not trying to push all blame on Apple Apple for the channel kind of dying down, not being as popular as it once was. I'm sure I play a role. The skits aren't for everybody. I understand that. And I definitely don't pour a ton of time and money into my production value. You'd think there'd be some kind of Apple kickback for me trying to make my whole channel shot on iPhone, but no, there's no reward for that. There's only a reward if you use fancy camera gear and fancy microphones to make content about Apple products and act like every one of them is amazing and fantastic, and you should all go out and buy one immediately. So I guess that's my advice to aspiring content creators out there. If you want to get into the tech game, whether or not you think it's right is, I guess, irrelevant. My point is, if you want your channel to grow, you kind of have to become very brand friendly these days, and you have to support a narrative that I think a lot of people believe in. Like, there's certainly a lot of people out there that want to cover and buy every new Apple product that comes out, no matter how insignificant the upgrades are, and you can never even entertain the idea of saying this product is probably not worth it. I don't think you should buy it. You just have to make videos covering the product and how great it is, and try to hope that you're catering to someone out there that actually does have the disposable income for it. But as soon as you get brand anti-friendly, you probably aren't going to cater to as great of a niche, and you're probably not going to get invited to the exclusive first look or hands-on kind of events that really give you a competitive edge against everybody else competing in the same space. If you can find a way to make content that you still feel is very honest and intriguing, and you're able to grow it, I'm happy for you. And thankfully, the Talos of Tech channel is not like my primary income. It's not my primary job. So I'm okay if in the future this channel kind of becomes more broad and kind of starts covering other subjects outside of Apple. Even if it doesn't perform all that well, I'm okay with it, because I'm just thankful that there's anybody at all watching or listening at this point. And I'm very thankful for the people who have stuck around through thick and thin, quite literally. And I'm very grateful for all of the hilarious feedback I get on my skits, or just knowing that one of the jokes I put in one of my videos making fun of a brand or making fun of a company made someone laugh, like it made someone's day. That brings me a lot of joy, and that's the reason I want to keep on doing this. That's the reason I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. Regardless of how the channel performs, I still think there will always be some level of activity here. Of course, very easy to make content when there's a big Apple announcement, right? But in these dry seasons in between the Apple events, that's when it becomes pretty difficult to stay relevant, pretty difficult to keep people watching, keep people interested. But I will do my best to cover it for you anyway, and try to do it in a way that is entertaining, but also honest, and try to keep that transparency with you guys so that you don't feel like I'm just trying to push you to buy the latest and greatest thing, even if I don't believe it is worth it. I'm not trying to get on the brand's good side. Like, we've abandoned that idea, I think, years ago now, and I'm not getting on anybody's nice list on this point. But you might happen to see a bit more activity on the EV channel, but it's only because there's so much more to talk about. But while it may be appealing to cater towards a specific niche, because once you get into those specific niches, you can grow your channel a lot faster. But that's my other one piece of advice to people out there, is maybe covering a more broad scope of content. It might not help you grow all that much, but if you grow slower with a broader coverage of content, your audience might stick around a little bit longer, because you're not going to go down with the ship if you base your whole channel over one brand, over one company. That's the one piece of advice I kind of wish I could give to younger Talos of Tech. You know, I just kind of leaned into the Apple coverage when I was young, because that was what was getting the most clicks, and that's what grew my channel so quickly. And I was just so obsessed with the idea of turning this into a full-time job that I was like, yeah, I'm just going to keep trying what works. If I can upload something that performs better than before, I should just keep uploading that thing, right? But maybe it's better to grow a little bit slower and cover a more broader range of content, so that you attract the right type of viewer, instead of people that are only watching you because you talked about Apple or because you talked about Tesla. I think it's actually really paid off to cover a wide range of EV channels over there, so that no matter what happens, there's lots of stuff that I can dive into and talk about over there. And I'm very thankful that I wasn't necessarily able to pivot this channel, but I was able to start a new one and carve out a whole new niche from that community. And very happy to see that channel growing and blossoming. And without that channel, I wouldn't have found my new job at Tello Trucks. And it's really, really exciting to actually be working on the brand's end as well, especially with a new startup company, and especially when they're doing something that you're passionate about and you want to see exist. I think that's ultimately what perseveres on YouTube. It's just a lot of trial and error. Well, let me try this. Okay, that didn't work. Well, let me try this. Oh, maybe that did work. Let me try that again. Let me iterate on that. And as long as you're willing to adapt yourself to the changing viewership trends and content forms, then I still believe there is a way to do it. But yeah, it is challenging and it is a competitive space. At the end of the day, thank you all for tuning in. And of course, thank you to everybody who's been supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps me out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Pure, and I'll see you in the next one.